Welcome. If we can all stand for the reading of the blessing before the Torah. Bless Yahweh, the Blessed One. Blessed is Yahweh, the Blessed One for all eternity. Blessed are you, Yahweh, our Elohim, King of the universe, who has chosen us from among all people and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, Yahweh. Bless his name, giver of the Torah. Amen. This week's Torah is Vayechi, and if you'll remain standing during the reading of the first part of the Torah, then you'll sit down.
Lord, grant us your law graciously. Now the Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen. They acquired property there and were fruitful and increased greatly in number. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. The years of his life were 147. When the time drew near for Israel to die, he called for his son Joseph and said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh and promise that you will show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt, but when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried."
So you may be seated. So again, here we have the second time that was mentioned a thigh covenant. Okay, and when we talk about the thigh covenant, we usually think of, under the thigh. Well, it's higher up because what they're making this blessing on is the descendants and where his children and his children's children are going to reside. So again, it's an important gesture. Because Jacob knew that his descendants were not going to live in Egypt, that they were going to the Promised Land, and he was going to make sure that he went with them and could be with the other patriarchs. Go ahead.
Sometime later, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel rallied his strength and sat up on the bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty has appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan. And there he blessed me and said to me, 'I am going to make you fruitful and will increase your numbers. I will make you a community of peoples, and I will give you this land as an everlasting possession to your descendants after you.' Now then, your two sons born to you in Egypt before I came to you here will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine. Any children born to you after them will be yours in the territory they inherit, and they will be reckoned under the names of their brothers. As I was returning from Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan. While we were still on the way, a little distance from Ephrath, so I buried her there beside the road to Ephrath. When Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked, 'Who are these?'"
So he'd already asked and knew that he was going to bless Ephraim and Manasseh. So when Joseph brings them in, is it interesting that he asks, "Who are these?" They tell us that his eyesight was failing, but he knew that his son Joseph was bringing these two boys with him, and they showed up, but he asks, "Who are these?" And it's so that the general thought is that it's stated as part of the blessing that he's introduced and told that he's going to be blessing Ephraim and Manasseh. Verse 9.
"Their sons God has given me here," Joseph said to his father. Then Israel said, "Bring them to me so I may bless them." Now Israel's eyes were failing because of old age, and he could hardly see. So Joseph brought his sons close to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face again, and now God has allowed me to see your children too. Then Joseph removed them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. And Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them close to him. But Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger. And crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph and said, May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they be called by my name and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly upon the earth. When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to him, No, my father, this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people. He too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations. He blessed them that day and said, In your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers. And to you, as one who is over your brothers, I give the ridge of the land I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow.
So several things are happening here. By taking Joseph's two sons that were born in Egypt and adopting them, right, they no longer became Joseph's sons. Now the ones that will come after these are going to be considered Joseph's sons, but Ephraim and Manasseh are now considered, as far as inheritance and blessings go, as Jacob's or Israel's sons. And I have to wonder how Ephraim and Manasseh felt about that. You know, let's see, her father was the viceroy of Egypt. He was the second most powerful person in the known world. He had riches beyond what they could comprehend. And his grandfather, Jacob, Israel, is now taking them from considered being under his fathers as far as inheritance goes, and now they're going to be under Jacob and Israel's. So I just wonder how they're, what's going through their mind. How does this benefit me? Because they grew up their whole life. All they've known is Egypt and Egyptian customs, and they see the honor that is bestowed upon their father, and their grandfather was brought to Egypt from a land that they had never visited, and what their grandfather had, what they were now going to be getting a blessing from, and their inheritance is going to be from Jacob, not Joseph. And everything that they believe from where they're standing, everything that Jacob has was given to him, provided to him by Joseph. So it just, it really makes my mind wonder how they think, because they don't know, or we don't have any indication that they know of the covenant made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's one thing. The blessings that are given, that we hope that you will be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, when we do our children's blessing, we don't say Ephraim and Manasseh. We use, may you be like Ruth and like Boaz. But traditional Jewish, when they bless their daughters on the beginning of Sabbath, it's with the names of the matriarchs. And the boys are like Ephraim and Manasseh instead of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that seems to be curious. And when you look at it, this is the way that Joseph got the firstborn blessing and Reuben didn't. Because when Ephraim and Manasseh are blessed, that's how Joseph gets the double portion that Jacob intended for him, since he was born from the woman that he really loved. And in his mind, that is his firstborn, his first desired was from his wife.
Then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather round so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel, for you went up unto your father's bed, unto my couch, and defiled it."
So Jacob does not feel that Reuben is worthy of the firstborn blessing because he defiled his bedroom of sexual immorality. So that removes him from the possibility of getting that firstborn's blessing.
Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel.
So Simeon and Levi, they were the ones that had the altercation in Shechem, and Jacob did not think that that was the right thing to do because they responded in anger, and anger makes us do things that we know we shouldn't do. And I've told you before, I can be, really feeling good and thinking that I'm walking with God and it's wonderful until I get in Portland traffic. And then my mind is doing things that are not from the Holy Spirit. Anger, the fastest way to take us out of that communion with God is for us to become angry. And so Jacob did not believe that they were deserving of what would be the second-born blessing. And I don't know what all they are, but firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn, as they go down, there's specific things that they're each supposed to get. The firstborn we know is a double blessing. But as it comes down, he didn't think that either of these two deserved that. So we're going to see who gets those later on. So Levi, now I was talking with Gabriel this morning. We think and believe that becoming a priest is a pretty high calling. To serve the Lord is how much does that? That's a really high calling. But in here it refers to them as servants, servitude. They're the ones that were going to do all the grunt work, all the labor to maintain the tabernacle once they leave Egypt, and then the temple after the temple is built. So they're doing the work, and they receive no land. They are provided sustenance through the offerings and the sacrifices, but they don't get a inheritance. Their inheritance is to serve, and to serve the Lord. So is it a blessing or is it a curse? And I guess that depends on our perspective. blessings, are they always blessings? You know, if we're blessed by, winning the lottery, say, all of a sudden you've got $10 million in the bank. Does anybody not think that that would be a blessing? Could anybody not use that, would turn it down? Well, what they have, and statistics show it out, is these people that get this unearned blessing, they've never handled that kind of money before, and within 5 years, they're further in debt than they were before they struck or hit the lottery or whatever this windfall that came in. And another place that we can see it is when the children inherit a very, very successful business from the father that they've never worked in. They've played their whole life. We call them the silver spoon kids. And then the father passes, and all of a sudden they become the owner, CEO, president, CFO, everything. And we watch what used to be a really good company, one that you wanted to do business with, become something that you don't want to have anything to do with because they just run it into the ground. So unearned blessings. Are they blessings or curses? And Simeon, they were given an inheritance, they were given land, but they were quickly absorbed. They didn't have any sense of that tribal community or union with each other, and they became absorbed by Judah.
An inheritance gained hastily will not prosper. Judah, your brothers, will praise you, and hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk.
So their blessing, Judah, is going to be the leaders, the political leaders of the nation. The kingship, King David will come through there. Yeshua, Mashiach David will come from this line. And now we're starting to, we just switched gears from this is why I don't to this is why I do. And it's been theorized or put forth that once this blessing was given, that was when there was a shift from preparation to and being tribes to now being Israel and the Israelites. Because under this kingship, under Judah, they form stronger bonds, and they bring us, they did bring us King David and Yeshua.
Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend toward Sidon.
Now, this reference right here says, after disqualifying his eldest three sons, leaving the blessing of kingship with Judah, Gen went on to offer prophecies over the rest of the tribe. And more of prophecy than blessings. And Zebulun and his descendants would prosper by the seashore and conduct sea trade. However, that doesn't tell us how they were going to do that, because I don't have the map to put up, but to see where it is, they didn't have the most favorable part of the country to make that happen.
Issachar is a raw-boned donkey, lying down between two saddlebags. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor.
So this is, again, what happens. They're an agricultural tribe. They're very successful in that they produce a lot of food and things that are tradable. They have a good amount of wealth, but it's kind of like the farmer that gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and doesn't get to go to bed till 11 o'clock at night. May have a lot of money, he may have had a lot of success, but he is working all the time, and both the rest of the tribes and the foreigners see them more as laborers than inheritors. Coming from Mennonite country, when you see the way that they work, if you were just to observe them from a distance and not get to know any of them, you would think that, gee, these people must be just scraping by. But then you find out that if somebody needs open heart surgery, they go to the bank, withdraw the money, and pay the $120,000. Because, yes, they work hard, but it's very simple, and they're very successful. And this continued on with this tribe as they grew.
Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider tumbles backward. I look for your deliverance, O Lord.
And this is another one that sounds like there's a conflict here. Tribe of Dan is going to be the judges. Samson was one of them, who the people of Israel were going to trust to make things fair and equitable among them. And so it was an honorable, and it would be a sought-after position. But at the same time, they're also described as a serpent that is so venomous that it can strike a horse's heel, and that venom will kill the horse, causing the rider to fall off backwards. And the idea of backwards, I mean, usually a horse throws you side, or they stop real quick and you go over the front, unless you roll down the hill with them altogether. So when they refer to the snake, many of the scholars are thinking that since the tribe of Dan was the first one to institute official, recognized, and accepted idolatry into their community, that is what it was, this blessing, this prophecy over them foreshadowed that, and they were the ones that were going to start this peeling away, or the destruction of what God had intended for these people to be his own.
Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels.
And it's short, but Gad was considered the early warning forces. They were east of the Jordan River, so there was a separation between them and the rest of Israel. So if an invading force was coming in, that's who they were going to encounter first, was the tribe of Gad. And they were very successful warriors. It seems like they believed in moving defense, whereas as the enemy comes in, you retreat, and then attack. You stretch them out, and you protect the body. While you're doing this, you've got messengers going back and bringing the rest of the Israeli warriors in to help to protect the kingdom.
Asher's food will be rich, for he will provide delicacies fit delicacies fit for a king.
And this tribe, they lived by the coast, and they were traders. It's from reading this, you think they're bakers, but they were traders, and this is where the idea of Jewish jewelers and gemstone crafters may have started. They became one of the wealthiest of the tribes and provided a lot for the Israelites.
Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns.
So Naphtali speaks about them being the free people. And this is, again, where you look into it. You know, free as the deer that roams. And there's not much more that I found about them, other than it seems that they were the one group of people that was accepted from all the tribes. It could be going back and forth. Lived west of the Galilee.
Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility, but his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you, with blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers.
So Joseph has already received some of this blessing that he's going to receive through Ephraim and Manasseh. And Ephraim was the main force, the main draw of the northern kingdoms. And the blessing that they had received, that they've become a nation, a great nation, and a multitude of nations. So Ephraim's descendants, and I don't have this book up here, but it talks about names of his descendants, and that's where we can get the Saxons, the Germanic, and all spread out. And they went out through the world, and they became the Goyim, or the Gentiles, as the northern kingdom went apart. Now, as we're extremely thankful and blessed that there was a diaspora and they spread out all over the world, and later we could be reconciled through those that had broken away from Christ, it seems interesting that Joseph, the favored son of Jacob, gets this blessing, but yet his descendants seem to be the ones that caused so much problem up north, being of the northern kingdoms and accepting the idolatry and going into it. And it's several books later we're going to find out that why they were not really the good guys. But it just struck me as odd that Ephraim and Manasseh get such a prominent position, but they led people astray in the northern kingdom. Not the way, well, God knows what he's doing, and because of them, we're here. But it wasn't easy. It was, the plan is complex. And also in Joseph's blessing, Yahweh's blessing comes back to him 5 times. And none of the other blessings do they really refer to Yahweh having an effect. But in Joseph's, it comes back to Yahweh 5 different times. And Yahweh's blessings of the heavens above, the deep, and numerous offsprings. And the last of the sons to receive a blessing is
Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the plunder.
So Benjamin is kind of described here as the special forces of the kingdom. It seems to be unclear, but the territory was between 2 of the most powerful tribes, Ephraim and Judah, which we know that's where the split came. So they were in a precarious situation, but they were very, very fierce warriors, and they might have been slowing this group down that wanted to go through their territory to attack or raid or plunder or take from the northern and the southern kingdoms. Saul, the first king of Israel, was a Benjamite.
All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessing appropriate to him. Then he gave them these instructions. I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite, along with the field. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried, and there I buried Leah. The field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his son, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people.
So things about Jacob's death and burial. He was the first one that we have evidence of that was embalmed using the Egyptian methods, the first of the Israelites. And one of the interesting things about the embalming process at that time, it apparently was so good that even today, if they uncover one of these, that the features of that person, we don't have anything to compare it to, but the features of that person are still intact. So if you had been a relative, you'd be able to look at them and tell. And that embalming process takes 40 days. So again, that number 40 that keeps reoccurring, significant. Also, here again, he reiterates that the Israelites, his people, are not going to remain in Egypt. And he wants to make sure that he's not left behind, because he doesn't want his remains in Egypt when the rest of his family is in Canaan, or the Promised Land. Also, one of the sources that I read said that to this day, the funeral procession, as Joseph went to Pharaoh and conveyed this idea that he made a promise to his father that he would take him and bury him with his ancestors, the patriarchs, that Pharaoh said, yes, you can go ahead and do that. And Pharaoh also commissioned a legion of his soldiers and wagons, chariots, to accompany him, not to make sure that they came back, but in honor of Jacob, his father. And that this was the largest, and still is, the largest and most expensive funeral procession and time of mourning in the world. And those of us that were around when we saw JFK's funeral procession and how big that was, or when one of the royalty of England dies, we can see, all of this stuff out there. But compared to Jacob's funeral procession as they went into Canaan, that was much more significant. Excuse me. And I just lost it. So once they've been there, now the brothers, and they may or may not have heard the story between Esau and Jacob, but the bad blood that was between those brothers, now they're worried that their father's gone. Esau had said that in honor of his father, he would not kill Jacob until after his father died. So now the brothers who had done him evil start to talk amongst themselves, and they think that, with Jacob gone now, Joseph may come and exact his revenge on us. So they're still dealing in fear and through their hearts. But Joseph, who has seen all the things that have happened to him, and some of them were pretty bad, he sees them all as God's plan and God's love for his people. So when they come to him, he lays aside those fears and tells them, no, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And the idea that he would take revenge on them was not in his heart anymore. He was there to love his brothers. They loved his father. There's no indication that he loved anything about his Egyptian lifestyle or his position. It's talked about that he was good at it, but not that he in any way loved it. But he loved his family, and he loved the patriarchs.
And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed into the image of his Son. Mike, I stood, and I want to apologize to you, Mike. I moved back here because I felt conviction to be standing for the reading. Joseph threw himself upon his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, so that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, "If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, then I will return." Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father as he made you swear to do." So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court and all the dignitaries of Egypt, besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers and those belonging to his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly, and there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning. That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim." So Jacob's sons did as they had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought as his burial place from Ephraim the Hittite, along with the field. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father.
Obviously, I got ahead of myself. One of the things that came in doing this research was the vast amount of wealth that Joseph was responsible for that the Egyptians had. And it was contrasted with when Israel left Egypt during the Exodus. We read that they took the gold of the Egyptians and they took it with them, and the Egyptians gave it to them because they wanted them to go ahead and leave. But depending on which version you're reading, it sounds like, they kind of, extorted this money from Egypt. My thought is that, and it's not my particular own thought, but I agree with it, the amount of money that Joseph made for Egypt when he was the viceroy was a vast amount of money. In fact, the previous rulers with Hammurabi that the Iranians had, their tax was 66 to 50%. That's what Hammurabi took from the farmers and the producers. 66% of what they produced went to Hammurabi. And when Joseph initiated his policies that what he was going to earn was going to be put into the storehouse, what he required was 20%, 1/5. So already these other countries are thinking, hey, we really like this guy. And then after Joseph has accumulated all this and put the storehouse up and the famine comes, everybody's coming and they're giving first their money that they had, then the animals that they had, then the land that they had, then they sold themselves into slavery, and Egypt is profiting from all of this. So they're becoming wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. And if you think about that amount of wealth that was accumulated during the time that Joseph was the viceroy, and then you use the compound interest theory over 400 years, when the Israelites left with the plunder of Egypt, they were underpaid, even though they got enough to fund them for quite a long time and build the tabernacle and eventually the temple.
Bring your tithe into the storehouse so that there may be food in my house. Test me in this and see if I won't open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing so large that you will not be able to contain it. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs that we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land and the land he promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, "God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place." So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after that they embalmed him. He was placed in a coffin in Egypt.
And this is where we close Genesis out. One other thing about this particular Torah portion, and I don't honestly remember the verbiage they used, but this is one that there's no distinction between this passage and the previous passage, or previous Torah portion. There's no punctuation or a space. And one of the theories is that since this is the concluding portion of this, this is also where there's a change in that when we get to Exodus next time, Israel, we go from how Israel became Israel in the 12 tribes, and now that they have a structure for how to move forward, now they're seen as a united group, and they become called Israelites. They're not called Israelites now. And as you heard through the reading, it goes back and forth many times using the name Jacob or Israel. And because of this portion being connected with the previous portion, and now we're going to go into the Exodus, that this is when they actually start to become a unified, for a while, nation. And they start to love each other. And why, I'm not sure why. Maybe somebody out there can tell me why. Why we say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when God says Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Idea? Just, that's one of those things that you get if you've got ADD. It just pops in there and you don't get over it. All right, we will adjourn and be back in 10 minutes for worship.